Welcome to Disaster Action Team Management, Module 3. In this module, we'll continue our exploration of DAT Response Operations Management. In Module 2, you learned about key response operations roles and responsibilities and how to build and lead a successful team. When you complete Module 3, you should be able to describe how the concept of operations assists leadership on a DAT response. Be able to describe how to manage complex responses. Appreciate the importance of coordinating with other programs and processes, and know where to find and how to use valuable tools and resources. In addition to personal skills related to managing their teams, DAT leadership has a variety of programmatic considerations that they need to keep in mind on a DAT response operation. They include applying the concept of operations to a DAT response, understanding their key responsibilities related to initiating a response, working with clients, considering diversity and disability, and applying fiscal controls on the scene, achieving service delivery goals, ensuring on-scene safety, and handling the media. In your role in DAT leadership, the concept of operations, or ConOps, is a valuable tool. It is used to support planning for, establishing, scaling, sustaining, and immobilizing all operations at the regional, divisional, and national levels. The concept of operations adapts the core principles and features of the incident command system. All disaster cycle services operations, regardless of incident complexity or type, use a standardized and modular table of organization, which incorporates deliberate activities in 6 major functional areas: command, operations, information and planning, logistics, finance, and external relations. On larger operations, each of these functional areas might have many positions within it. For smaller events, like DAT operations, all 6 of these functional areas still need to be performed, though an individual person may fulfill multiple functions. To learn more, search for Concept of Operations, Program Essentials on the Exchange. Whether you are a DAT manager or DAT supervisor, your key responsibilities, qualifications, training, and other important information is outlined in the volunteer position description for your position. A full list of standardized position descriptions is available on the Volunteer Position Descriptions Index on the Exchange. Even though all DAT process phases contribute to the success of an operation, there are 4: initial response, on-scene assessment, service delivery, and end of response that are central to every DAT response. Each one has a set of standards associated with it. It is DAT leadership's responsibility to ensure these standards are met. Let's examine how the DAT leadership roles interact and what decisions they need to make in the first few minutes of a DAT response. A disaster action team has just arrived on the scene of an apartment fire. After completing their on-scene assessment, they determine that the fire is affecting many units in the apartment building, and this response is evolving into a more complex operation. The DAT supervisor contacts the duty officer to let her or him know this is a more complex response. Mass care will likely be required, and additional support will be needed. They discuss what DAT responsibilities and tasks will change and if mass care services, such as sheltering and feeding, will be needed. They also discuss other considerations like, do we need to notify public affairs? Do we need disaster health services? Or disaster mental health on scene or standby? Has DAT on-call leadership been notified? What casework and recovery planning services might be needed? Do additional responders need to be put on standby? Please refer to the Regional Response Operational Checklist job tool in the DAT Toolkit on the Exchange for more information on considerations and initial actions when a DAT response scales up. How did DAT leadership determine that the situation had evolved into a more complex response? A significant part of DAT leadership's role is to determine a disaster response's level of complexity. This determination drives all decisions about incident management. The concept of operations provides more details on assessing incident complexity in its role in managing, resourcing, and budgeting an operation. To learn more, search for the concept of operations program essentials on the Exchange. When you think of incident complexity, what aspects come to mind? The number of anticipated clients? The types of services and assistance needed to meet clients' needs? DAT leadership who are supporting an initial response that is scaling up need to answer these questions. Do we have enough responders? Do we need to call in other Red Cross programs such as disaster health services or disaster mental health? Will we need to open a shelter? What is the local threshold for doing so? Who should I notify that the event is growing? And how are we tracking multiple clients, families, and units affected? Simply put, scaling up is the process of adding human, material, and financial resources to a disaster operation. The bigger the scope, the higher the cost. In scaling up, disaster leaders must ensure a sufficient support system is in place at each step of the process. It is also important for DAT leadership to scale up resources in sync with the demands of the event. For example, opening 3 shelters, which would require more human, material, and financial resources, likely wouldn't be necessary for an apartment fire that impacted 20 families. Establishing good relationships prior to disasters, along with the local Red Cross employee and volunteer knowledge of the affected population, geography, shelters, partners, and vendor agreements are critically important in this process. In our apartment fire example, responders in disaster action team roles may transition to more formal operational roles as the event scales up. While it is understood that disaster action teams are focused on home fires and other small-scale responses, DAT responders are encouraged to cross-train for other activities in order to smoothly transition to a disaster relief operation role. Many DAT members choose to be fully qualified in several group activity positions, GAPs, in order to support their local areas. For more information on GAP requirements, the concept of operations provides guidance for the operational roles required as the event scales up. In the apartment fire example, a DAT manager, Theo, learned that one of the residents suffered smoke inhalation and was taken to the hospital before the DAT arrived. He also learned that a DAT responder twisted her ankle rushing to the scene. Theo calls the DAT duty officer, Natalie, to report the incidents.
Hi, Theo. You say there are injuries. Can you describe them?
Yes. A client suffered smoke inhalation, and one of the DAT responders was injured at the scene.
Theo then calls the disaster program manager using his chapter procedures and lets them know that some triggers were met for an initial incident report, or IIR. Natalie collects more details about the incident, such as its location, so she can begin to fill in the IIR template. The disaster program manager, or the disaster program manager's designee, is responsible for completing and distributing the report within 2 hours of the incident. To learn more about triggers for an initial incident report, refer to Disaster Action Team Program Standards and Procedures and the On-Scene Assessment Job Tool in the DAT Toolkit on the Exchange. If the apartment fire had scaled up to a Level 2 operation, the regional leadership on-call role would be responsible for creating a situation report known as SITREP. This report captures unstructured data which addresses 4 areas: actions from today, sustainable local capacity building, concerns, and suggestions. The Disaster Action Team program is the foundation of a regional response, which means that DAT leadership needs to be familiar with and work closely with many other partners, programs, and processes within the Red Cross. Building this knowledge and relationship starts during steady state, but engaging them during an operation is a key to success. DAT leaders should not only have strong relationships with other leaders, but also need to be familiar with doctrine, job tools, and toolkits from other DCS functions. Working together on a response with other programs is what ensures effective and efficient service delivery to our clients. How would DAT leadership interact with other roles in these scenarios? In this course, you learned about DAT steady-state roles and responsibilities, how to build and lead a DAT program team, including managing challenges and creating opportunities for professional development, and the importance of after-action reviews. You also learned about key response operations roles and responsibilities, describing how the concept of operations assists leadership on a DAT response, understanding how to manage complex responses, appreciating the importance of coordinating with other programs and processes, and knowing where to find and how to use valuable tools and resources. As a DAT leader, you know that your training and education does not end with this one course, especially if you are interested in developing other skills and roles. Your career path goals are a good roadmap and can identify key courses and experiences you will need to advance. We've put together a handy table that highlights key resources related to the topics covered in this course. We asked some DAT responders what DAT meant to them.
What I've noticed in my years as a DAT volunteer is what people are going to remember the most is how they felt when you listened to their story and showed compassion. They will likely remember that forever.
It is humbling to wrap a blanket around someone who has just lost their home to a fire. In that moment, you are safety and comfort and hope. You provide the first step to their becoming whole again by making sure they have somewhere to go and food to eat. The inconvenience of getting out of bed or changing your plans to respond quickly fades when you realize that your assistance means this family will not be homeless tonight.
When I get to a DAT call, I look into the client's eyes. I usually see despair. If I can change this look of despair to one of hope, I have made a connection. If I can make the client smile, even for only a second, I've made a connection. If the client holds my hand, I've made a connection. If the client cries on my shoulder, I've made a connection. If the client hugs me, I've made a connection. Names will fade first. Faces will fade second. But the client will remember that Red Cross vest forever.
Remember, disaster action teams are the foundation of our disaster response and are the face of the Red Cross in our communities. Your role as a DAT leader is vital to the DAT responders being able to provide these essential services. Congratulations! You have completed Disaster Action Team Management.